अन्तर्यश्च बहिर्विधूततिमिरं ज्योतिर्मयं शाश्वतं स्थानं प्राप्य विराजते विनमतान् अज्ञानमुन्मूलयन् पश्यन् विश्वमपीदमुल्लसति यो विश्वस्य पारे परः तस्मै श्रीरमणाय लोकगुरवे शोकस्य हन्त्रे नमः। तस्मै श्रीरमणाय लोकगुरवे शोकस्य हन्त्रे नमः।
Good morning to all of you. I'm glad to be in the company of so many Bhagavan's devotees today. And I pray for Bhagavan to be with us, to guide us through the session, so that we all progress on the spiritual path leading to the attainment of the supreme goal of life. Adi Shankara says, right in the beginning of Viveka Chudamani, that three things are difficult to obtain except through divine grace: a human birth, the longing for liberation, that is mumukshutva, and gaining the association of a wise person or guru to guide you, to whom you have to surrender. Bhagavan says that only after 84,000 janmas as plants, insects and animals, one becomes a human being. Thus we can see how difficult it is to get a human birth. Of all the births, the birth as a human being is the best, because the intelligence is the highest, and there is the potential for one to realize his true nature and end the long life cycle which has been continuing like a chain for numerous births. From plant life, which has only one sense, the sense of touch, life evolves into two senses as in worms and leeches, three senses as in butterflies, four senses in snakes, bees and flies, and five senses in animals and birds, and finally into human beings with the sixth sense, which is his intellectual and discriminative capacity, with which he is able to think, analyze and understand what is right and wrong, what is real and unreal, and make the right choices in life for his progress. Due to the intellectual capacity, man can ponder, realize his mistakes, and change himself, his nature, and thus keep evolving in life. Because of this capacity to discriminate, man is responsible for his actions, and that's why the law of karma is applicable to him. He reaps the fruits of his actions. Since animals lack the intellectual capacity to think rationally, they are not subject to the law of karma. So, if a tiger or lion kills a deer and eats it, no karma is formed. But if we do it, karma will surely be formed. However, even in a man, the intellect has to be developed. It has to be activated. This happens only when his mind becomes subtle by connecting to a higher power. Till then, he will be acting only according to the vasanas rising in his gross mind. But when he gains the use of his intellect, he can think and act and not blindly follow whatever the mind feels, which is normally of the ego. And the ego arises from ignorance. Whereas the intellect, which is the seat of knowledge, is connected to the heart, which is the seat of pure knowledge, untainted by ignorance. Thus, the goal of life is to shift the mind from the head to the heart and unite it with the self or the Atma. This is the purpose of sadhana. This is the benefit of Ramana Margam. Then we will regain our true and original nature, which is the self or Atma. This is what Bhagavan's Atmavichara does. The intellect has the capacity to control the mind and direct it on the right path. How? By giving understanding to the mind. Then the mind will calm down and be able to make the right decisions. When the mind is agitated due to vasanas falling in it, if you can think through the intellect, then you can calm it and make it positive. That is to bring it back to equanimity or samabhava. This is what helps us to purify our mind so that we can internalize it and do the sadhana to reach the self and end our life cycle. This is not possible for animals and other species. Thus, till the sixth sense is activated, man too will live and act like animals without much thinking. In the process, he will be adding karmas to his soul, which will lead to his repeated births in samsara. Even after becoming a human being, one will be born 100 to 200 times before coming to the path of jnana, which will lead him to mukti in a few janmas due to the spirit of enquiry gained. This is the path shown by Bhagavan for achieving the supreme goal of life, which means his teachings are the highest, like PhD. Thus, the power to enquire comes only through grace, and grace is obtained only when you lead your life gracefully and graciously in thought, word and deed. If you are egoistic or selfish, you will not get any grace. Suppose you are walking on the road and a blind person is crossing the road. If you help him to cross the road, it will help you to get the grace. If you are going on a road and there is a big stone on the path, many will just go without doing anything about it. The person who thinks that it will be a problem for all the people who are using the road will get out of his vehicle and try to push the stone away. Then he will get the grace. Thus, when you think for others, you will get the grace of God to enquire. With this grace, you will be able to think and understand. Only when you enquire, you will be able to evolve. If you don't enquire, life will not change, as you will be living in ignorance. And misery will keep coming again and again. That's why Bhagavan says in Aksharamanamalai, stanza 46, "Oh Arunachala, of what use is this birth without the ability to do enquiry? Pray make me fit for doing enquiry." I will state the stanza in Tamil. I don't know Telugu. Tupparivu illa ippirappu en payan oppidavayen Arunachala. And when you enquire, your ego will reduce and agitations will end due to the understanding gain, and you will be able to rise above the situation. So what is this jnana marga? It's only to think and act. Vicharam or enquiry is the essence of jnana marga. It sounds so easy, but hard to implement in practice. Most of the time we act instinctively or impulsively and regret later when things go wrong. Therefore, we should think before acting to minimize faults. Also, only when we think we can understand where we are going wrong. And only when we inquire and realize our mistakes, we will be able to evolve. So, evolution, what is this evolution? Evolution means mental development. Physically, we are all evolved to the highest, which is the human being, So this is where Bhagavan's teachings help us. This is the Ramana Marga. It helps us how to evolve in life and reach the supreme goal of life, which is to become one with the self and attain mukti. So how can we apply it in our day-to-day life for our spiritual development, this Ramana Margam? Bhagavan says that those who are on the spiritual path and wish to attain their goal of liberation should do the following 4 things. Control their mind or ego, control the senses, not to sin, see through their karmas with the understanding of the karma siddhanta by holding on to God and Guru. What is this karma siddhanta? It is a popular saying, as you sow, so you reap. It means for whatever you do, there is a consequence in the form of a karma or imprint being formed of the soul, which we have to face later on. No one can escape from their karmas. Even Bhagavan had to face his karmas in the form of numerous ailments. Also, initially, he had to go and beg for his food daily. Thus, we can see that the law of karma is inviolable. Nobody is exempt from it. Bhagavan says that whatever you do for others, you are only doing for yourself, because there are no others. The same self exists in all. The forms may vary, but the substance is the same. Therefore, if you do good things, you get good things in return. And if you do wrong things, you will get misery in return. Knowing this, we should be careful in the way we conduct ourselves so that we don't do sins and acquire bad karmas. It is karmas and unfulfilled desires that bring us back to birth. So we should be alert to whatever we do in thought, word and deed, so that we don't have to suffer later on. We should only be kind and helpful to others and do our duties properly, so that we generate punya karmas. Punya karmas will facilitate our evolution and help us to face our bad karmas by cushioning their impact. It is like how a helmet protects a motorcycle rider. Here, helmet is the good karmas that will protect when the rider meets with an accident. When we understand this karma siddhanta, we will be able to accept our karmas whenever they fructify, thinking that it is because of our past misdeeds. It means nobody else is to be blamed for whatever is happening in our life. We alone are responsible for everything. Others are only agents of nature to give us the karma we deserve. They are like the courier agent delivering your letter or parcel. If something he delivers is not to our liking, will we blame the courier boy or the person who sent it? Inquiring thus, we will understand that everything comes in our life only based on our own past actions, done either in this birth or in some previous birth. And all the fruits of karma will only come through others, particularly family members, who are only the agents of nature to give us our karma we deserve. This is the understanding we should have always. And by holding on to God and Guru, we will gain the strength of mind to see through all our karma smoothly without reaction. Then the load on the soul will begin to reduce, and over a period of time, we will be able to feel the lightness of it in our mind, provided, of course, we correct all our faults and lead a virtuous life, so that we don't add fresh karmas in ignorance. That's why we need spiritual knowledge to purify our life and make suitable changes so that we are on the path of liberation. Bhagavan says that we should see through all our karmas and burn them like camphor without leaving any residue. If we react to the karma which comes in the form of an adverse situation, we will create fresh karmas due to the reaction in the form of agitations like anger, hatred, rudeness, pride, jealousy, violence, etc. These are the ways we react when we are agitated. It means the karma won't end fully. It will leave a residue like coal, candle or oil lamp. The coal leaves the maximum residue, which you would have seen, this in house, if you are using this doop, generally it is made of that coal. So when you burn it, after some when it's fully burned, you will still see the entire ashes in the form of the the entire coal will remain like that. You can see the entire form remaining. So much of residue is there in the coal. the candle will be lesser than the coal. Candle, when it burns, it leaves a lot of residue, but it will be much lesser than coal. Almost 50% of the candle will be, will remain. And the oil lamp will be the least. So the best is to burn the karmas like camphor, so that the soul is rid of one bad karma fully. That's why we have the ritual of arati using camphor in temples. It is to indicate that we should burn our ego for karmas like camphor in order to have the darshan of the Lord. This is possible only when we have the right understanding and remembrance of the karma siddhanta and strength of mind, and are holding on to God and Guru while facing situation. This is how we should face and finish all our past karmas whenever they fructify. So why do we react to any situation? It's because the situation is not to our liking and we want to change it. Can we change anything? This is what Bhagavan tells his mother in his first written message after coming to Tiruvannamalai. He was then staying in Pravachanam, a small hillock on the eastern side of Arunachala, and observing silence. He had not yet started speaking. You may remember the first time he spoke to public was when he was in the Virupaksha cave to Kavyakanta Ganapati, when he came to seek guidance on how to do tapasya. So what Bhagavan did is wrote a message. His mother was coming and every day to plead with him to come back with her to Madurai. And Bhagavan was not inclined to listen to her. So finally, he wrote his message on a piece of paper at the request of a devotee. His message is not just for her, but for all of us. The ordainer controls the fate of souls in accordance with their prarabdha karma. Whatever is destined not to happen will not happen, try as you may. Whatever is destined to happen will happen. Do what you may to prevent it. This is certain. The best course, therefore, is to remain silent. So to remain silent means to accept the situation and be detached from it, as we cannot change it. We should just learn to see through it by holding on to Bhagavan and thus finish our karma smoothly without leaving any residue. It means we should not react to anything. And if we react, we should inquire and cut it off at the earliest. This is the way to cut off the ego, which rises as negative thoughts and emotions. This is how we should face situations in our life. And this is the prerequisite for doing tapasya later on, when the ego has reduced substantially. As we try to put the teachings to practice, Bhagavan as a Sadguru would surely help all those who look to him. Bhagavan says, as a prey that has got caught in the tiger's jaws can never escape, so too those who have come under the ambit of his gracious look shall be saved and never forsaken. This is the assurance of Bhagavan to all those devotees who practice his teachings. The basic thing is we should overcome our ego. Attaining egolessness is the goal of life, which leads to mukti. Ego is not something tangible which we can see. Only when it rises, if we are alert, we can notice it and cut it off. Thus, we should cut all negative thoughts and negative emotions. We should also cut all our excitements, worry and fear. That is, we should remain in the present and not think of the past or the future. When we react, it is the ego that is rising in the form of negative emotions, such as anger, hatred, jealousy, foul words, etc. I mentioned earlier, creating new karmas in ignorance. When we yield to the ego without controlling it, it will only increase. It will get strengthened, that ego. And this is not good for those who want to achieve the goal of liberation. We should only try to reduce our ego and eliminate it totally to attain mukti. Therefore, in every situation, we should overcome our reactions arising out of agitations of the mind. All our reactions are only ego rising in that form. So we should control our ego whenever it rises and make our mind positive through patience, prayers and inquiry. Without inquiry, the mind will not become positive. And inquiry should always be done with an open mind, without any prejudice. It should not be done with the feeling that the other person is wrong, which will only justify our behavior. When we do the inquiry in this manner without self-justification, we will be able to understand where we went wrong and just let go of all our agitations and become peaceful. If we remember the karma siddhanta, we will realize that it's only our own karma that is manifesting through somebody or some situation, and we should accept it gracefully and see through it by experiencing it. So we should always think that one load on the soul is being reduced through the experiencing of this bad karma. So the soul is getting purified in the process. So this is the way to finish all our karmas and purify our soul. If we keep finishing all our karmas in this manner, they will all surely end one day. And we will be able to come to the path of Atmavichara and end our life cycle. It is the final path, this Atmavichara. In this manner, by overcoming our ego, whenever it rises as negative thoughts and negative emotions, and by correcting all our faults, bad habits, bad behavior, we will be able to purify your mind and reduce the ego. Only when the ego has been reduced sufficiently, we will be able to internalize the mind and do the sadhana of self-inquiry so as to reach the heart and subside. Now, coming to the path of Bhagavan's Vichara, it has two parts. One is self-inquiry, and other is who am I inquiry, or the Atma Vichara. So what is this first part? You know, it is like the CA exam. You have the preliminary and final. You know, self-inquiry, the first part is to look at yourself, and inquire into your faults, your reactions, your emotions, your bad habits, your negative thoughts, etc. You know, it is inquiring into one's own self. Inquiring about others is not self-inquiry. This is also known as introspection. Such an introspection will help us to understand what we are at present. We should know what is our present state of affairs, what we are. So what we are can be known only when we look at ourselves. It will help us to know what are the good and bad qualities we possess. Knowing what we are will help us to understand what corrections we have to make to purify our mind and heart and progress on the spiritual path. Even after knowing our faults, it's not so easy to change ourselves, as the mind will resist all changes. Try it out and you will know. Even the smallest change is very difficult to make. So we need a lot of grace and punya karmas to be able to inquire and change ourselves. Also, our inquiry will help us to know how much ego we are having, based on how much we react during our interactions with others, how much resistance we are having to change. So all these are reflections on the extent of our ego within us. And only when we are alert to our thoughts and behavior during our interactions, we will be able to know what kind of person we are. It means we have to turn the spotlight upon ourselves. Normally, in every situation, the ego will only try to see what the other person is doing or saying, and thus it will justify all our reactions, saying that the fellow deserves it. Whenever we try to justify ourselves, we should realize that it is only our ego that is getting strengthened. Instead, if we think for 1 minute, what did I do or say? Why did I become angry and say those harsh words, foul words, etc.? We realize what karmas we have added in the process. It doesn't matter. It's not the question of who is right or wrong, but what is the reaction we are having. So this is what Bhagavan asks us to control. Then only our ego will weaken, and one day we will qualify for the part 2 of the Vichara. Thus we have to prepare ourselves for many years by purifying our mind regularly and reducing the ego very alertly every time we are affected. We should also ensure that we do all our duties in the family properly without neglect. Then only the karmas will end. And our family responsibilities will also end. Then we'll have more time to devote for our spiritual development. If we have developed detachment from the world by this time, we'll be able to internalize the mind and seek our true I, or the self, through Atmavichara. This is the final path, or the royal path, that will lead us to our supreme destination of oneness with the self. Thus, we should understand that Bhagavan wants us to finish up all our karmas smoothly, so that we will qualify for doing the tapasya of self-inquiry later on, to seek our real life, which is the who am I inquiry. This is possible only when the ego has been reduced to a large extent. The ego at the beginning is like a small banyan seed. From this, it grows into a big banyan tree over the janmas. How to cut such a giant tree? We have to climb and first cut the top branch, then the side branches. Then finally, the trunk must be cut little by little. Then what you will have is a stump, the last portion that can be cut with an axe or a power saw. And the roots too can be destroyed. But you cannot cut the whole banyan tree at the roots all of a sudden. That's why, through a change of lifestyle and contemplation with an open mind, we have to correct our faults, conquer our emotions and reactions, and thus cut the ego little by little. Finally, it will become like a small stump. Then it can be cut off fully through Atmavicharam and meditation. But straight away, if you try to meditate, you won't be able to do it. You can't even internalize the mind unless the ego has softened. So thus, a lot of preparation is required for a number of years before you succeed. Unless the ego is softened through timely inquiry, every time we are affected or react to a situation, it's not possible to internalize mind and do the sadhana of Atmavicharam, or the who am I inquiry, which alone will lead to the total destruction of the ego at the roots, leading to mukti. Thus, we must strive to conquer our ego at every stage, as and when it rises, and cut it off through sadhana, inquiry, and prayer. It's like a fort example of Bhagavan. Bhagavan used to give this example of a fort under siege by the enemy forces, which want to capture it. What should it do? What should that, what will the enemy do? As and when a soldier peeps his head out from the palace, you should kill him. Finally, the fort will be yours. You will be able to enter it and reach God within. Thus, to kill a soldier, which is only the ego rising as different negative emotions, we have to inquire thoroughly to go to the root and cut it off. Otherwise, with mere understanding, it will be like the soldier being only wounded and not killed. Because it takes a long time for each soldier to be killed, the total ego takes janmas to be destroyed. In the first phase of self-inquiry, we are only focusing on the sprouts which are grown like branches in the tree of ego, in the form of anger, greed, jealousy, hatred, etc., selfishness, and removing them. Once they are sufficiently removed, the mind is purified to a large extent. The tree of ego has been cut to a large extent. Now only the stump of the tree remains. And cutting the stump is done through sadhana of meditation on the self, which is called also the nididhyasana, which will eventually take us to the root of the tree of ego, where we can cut it off totally. Thus, in the first phase of self-inquiry, we are weakening the ego I and making our mind pure, so that we can next internalize and seek the real I, which is the I of the self. And this real I manifests only when the ego I has subdued, is destroyed. So this is the second phase of self-inquiry, which consists in asking the question, who am I? And focusing on the source from which the feeling of I arises. And this is what I said, what Bhagavan taught as the way to do tapasya for Kavyakanta Ganapati Muni. So if we sustain with the focus on the feeling of I, on the spot, that is the meditation on the self, the mind will eventually reach its source and subside, revealing the true self that is behind it. If we sustain with our sadhana, the mind will eventually merge in the self and become one with it, which is self-realization or mukti. This is jnana. This is the attainment of jnana. This is the end of jnana. Jnana is not just some self-knowledge or book knowledge. It is a realization. It is the actual becoming one, experiencing it, experiencing the self and becoming one with it, like how Bhagavan did. May Bhagavan grant us his grace to attain the supreme goal of life in this very birth and end our life cycle. This is Ramana Marga in brief. With this I conclude my speech. Thank you. If there are any questions, anybody has doubts, I'd be glad to clarify to the extent I know.
Question and answer session andi ante మీకు ఏదైనా సందేహాలు ఉంటే ఇప్పుడు మాట్లాడే సబ్జెక్ట్ మీద సందేహాలు ఉంటే అడిగితే వారు సమాధానం ఇస్తారు. సో మీరేం చేయాలంటే మీరు సందేహాలు ఉండే వాళ్ళు రేస్ చేయాలి. హ్యాండ్ రేస్ చేస్తే నేను దానికి మీకు అన్మ్యూట్ చేస్తాం. రైస్ చేయడం ఎలా అంటే పక్కన మీకు ఇది ఉంటుంది, 3 చుక్కలు ఉంటాయి. ఆ 3 చుక్కల మీదుగా మీరు టచ్ చేస్తే మీకు ఒక ప్యానల్ వస్తుంది, ఓపెన్ అవుతుంది. అందులో చెయ్యి పై ఉంటుంది, హస్తం గుర్తు లాగా. హస్తం గుర్తు మీద కనుక మీరు క్లిక్ చేస్తే వెంటనే మీ స్టేటస్ హస్తం గుర్తు ప్రదర్శింపబడుతుంది. సో వెంటనే మేము అర్థం చేసుకొని మీరు ఏదో అడగబోతున్నారు, అడగాలనుకుంటున్నారు అర్థం చేసుకొని మీకు అన్మ్యూట్ చేస్తాము. కాబట్టి దయచేసి మీరు ఫేస్ చేయండి సందేహాలు ఉండేవాళ్ళు. For those who want to raise a question, please raise your hand, then your question.
Sir, I have one very basic.
Can you speak a bit louder, please? I can't hear.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Now, am I audible, sir? Am I audible?
Yeah, a little better.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry about that.
And now it's clear. Now it's clear.
Yeah. So, because this is such a practical way you have explained everything, so I muster the courage to ask a very basic, very practical doubt that arises whenever there is a situation. So you said in your talk, you said not to react. Yes, that part I understood. But then how do you recognize when you're reacting or responding, or whether you're just acting? You're supposed to just do nothing about any situation which you find yourself in. That is the basic doubt I got when I heard you say that. Can you please clarify? Please? Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, there is a vast difference between reaction and response. Okay, reaction is of the ego, whereas response is of the intellect. You can respond only when your mind is peaceful. When you are reacting, you wanted to know how you know it's a reaction. Yes, reaction comes when your mind is agitated. See, somebody in your house, say your children or somebody back answers you when you say something. Immediately what happens? Your mind will be agitated, is it not? So it's a reaction. So what happens? Generally, our ego also will rise as a consequence of somebody telling something, because that person's ego has risen. He is shouting at me or telling something to back answering. Then what happens? Our ego will rise as a consequence, like sympathetic vibration, and we will also react. How can he talk to me like this? And there will be a ladai, slowly that arguments will be coming. Bhagavan says only fools argue, because all arguments are arise from the level of ego. So if we understand this karma siddhantam, okay, this back answering or somebody telling something rude to us, even without any provocation, without our doing anything, and if we are alert, we'll realize, okay, one karma is coming through that person. Mostly I told you, it is from a family member. So then what happens if you remember that karma siddhantam? Yes, one karma is coming. I just have to think, Bhagavan, give me strength to bear it and not react. So generally mind will be reacting inside, at least. It will be telling, he's shouting at me, he's telling all these things. Then if you are holding on to Bhagavan at that time and praying to him, then what happens is your mind gets the strength to not to react. Most of the times all these situations will last only for a few minutes only. That's why it is said that only when two hands clap there will be a noise. But one hand clapping, every fight will end fast. So when the other person doesn't react and add fuel to the fire, what happens is that the person who is shouting at us or telling something, abusing us, he will also calm down, because you are thinking of Bhagavan and keeping quiet. You see, Bhagavan's message to mother, I said, no, Bhagavan is telling, therefore it's best to remain silent. That means keep quiet. Okay, he is shouting. When do we react? Because we get involved with the situation. So lose ourselves. We lose our balance of mind. Then we react. So if we remember the karma siddhanta, okay, one karma is coming for me, okay, let me face and finish it off, like camphor, as Bhagavan is telling. Then what will happen? He'll shout for 2-3 minutes. If you are not responding, if you are not reacting, he'll keep quiet and go off. That is the way to end all our situations. But instead, if I also react, then what will happen? You will shout, then he will shout, again you will shout, again what happens? You are now adding fresh karmas. What should have ended in 3 minutes, you will stretch it to 10 minutes. Not only that, effect of this reaction, whole day you will be upset. Arey, he spoke like this, and your mood will be off. You can't do anything. Is it not? So that is how we keep adding to karmas. So Bhagavan says, if we should always be alert to the ego rising and cut it off by holding on to him. And through vicharam. What is that vicharam we should do? Arey, he is shouting. Why should I also shout? Why should I react? I'll just keep quiet and leave it. And later on, when he has calmed down, later, if he is your close person to you, you can tell him, Arey, why did you shout? I didn't do anything. So that time he will be more receptive because he is calm. And maybe he has some grievance against you also. He'll say, Amma, you did like this. So that time, okay, I won't do hereafter. I'll know, okay, I'm doing like this, so that is upsetting him. And then you will immediately, you can correct yourself. Okay, take a feedback. Okay, I'm sorry, I did like this. So you can say sorry and leave it there. You see, he is also happy, you are also happy. So this is what is called response. Response means considered response. That means after due consideration, thinking. Okay, I didn't do anything, or I don't know what I did. Okay, I'll keep quiet now. And then ask him when he cools down. So this is the way to face and finish all our karmas. I hope, is it understood?
Yes, sir. Yes. Thank you so much. Yes.